Well, thank you very much for the invitation to deliver a keynote at this important event. Apologies, I'm unable to join you in person, but I'm glad that technology has made it possible for me to still contribute to the discussion. This afternoon, I'm joining you from Oxford in the United Kingdom. And again, thanks for the invitation to contribute to the discussion. Well, I've been asked to speak about Africa, and I am not surprised that the Cyprus Forum has honed in on a continent that is important and central to global politics as well as global economy for a lot of reasons. Africa's strategic importance to the world cannot be overemphasized or overstated. It's a continent with, 54 countries richly blessed with natural and mineral resources. Because often people tend to look at Africa as a country and not a continent. So when we talk about Africa, it's important to note that Africa has got 54 countries with different nationalities and different diverse groups of people. As part of my keynote, I just want to highlight three major things that perhaps can form the basis of the conversation. The centrality of Africa's role in global politics and global economy explains why a few weeks ago, Africa was admitted as a member of the G21. And we believe as Africans and welcome that development because it gives Africa a voice in the decision-making table. The second critical point that I want to note is this scramble for Africa. EU, the US, Asia, Russia, everyone is scrambling for Africa. It's scrambling for Africa because beyond the markets that exist within Africa, Africa is home to a lot of resources and natural resources. And so when you look at geopolitics, you look at the way that countries are engaging. In the last 1 year, there have been several Africa summits, both within Africa and then outside Africa. And the whole agenda around this engagement with the continent is how to harness its potential and do business with Africa as well as trade with Africa. But at the heart of this is the fundamental question about Africa's development. And whether in the discussions around global politics, around global economy, if attention is paid to Africa's development, and this is why most African presidents have been leading the charge in the conversation around the global finance infrastructure for either addressing climate change or addressing the global economic crisis. And Africa, a few weeks ago, met in Kenya, the Climate Change Summit, to look at a new form of finance and infrastructure, especially issues relating to debts within the continent. And I strongly agree with the heads of states that it is important to have a conversation about the global financial infrastructure in such a way that it doesn't further in-debt Africa. It's one where debt reliefs are provided because you can't be taking a lot from Africa and not invest in Africa's development. I think the third bit is about the pandemic of discontent expressed by citizens, either on the streets of Mali, or in Gabon, or in Burkina Faso, or in Guinea, or in Niger, where military coups have become the order of the day. And the reasons are not far-fetched. They are not far-fetched because Africa's redemption from exploitative local elites, as well as some exploitative foreign partners, is simply the cry that citizens, especially young people, are making from those streets. And I hope that as you think about Africa, think about Africa's engagement, whatever agenda has to align with the agenda of the citizens who are clamoring for Africa's redemption. And its redemption, from exploitative global partnerships that takes so much from the continent and doesn't give back or leave the continent more impoverished than it is currently, or one that liberates, Africans from exploitative elites. And the regional institutions have been playing a critical role. The African Union, ECOWAS, IGA, ECAS, all these are sub-regional institutions. They have a role, no doubt, and they are playing the role. It's just that the politicization of multilateral institutions has become the bane of Africa's engagement. And I hope that as you think about how to engage Africa, it is important to put Africa's interest on the agenda. It's important to put the people, the citizens of Africa, into context. And any parasitic relationship and engagement with Africa that takes so much and doesn't give back is one that will face resistance from Africans. And you can see what happened in Niger, where citizens are supporting, military dictatorship, because for them, it's about, seizing and reclaiming the state, from very parasitic relationships and being enjoyed, by selected political elites on the continent. But as I conclude, that despite the gloomy picture in Africa, there are interesting and good stories, positive stories of impact coming out of Africa. If you look to Botswana, if you look to Rwanda, if you look to some parts of Ghana and other countries, you will see that African leaders are taking, actions to develop their people. But this may be at a small scale and it needs to be scaled. And I think the kind of partnership that Africa requires is the one that keeps Africa's development at its center stage. I thank you for the invitation, and I hope that I've not been too provocative, but I really look forward to further engagement on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samson, for your intervention and for joining us online. We will have now our next panel, which is a fire chat on digital diplomacy. So please, the panel. Thank you. You can have one each. Yes.
Well, last but not least, for the day at least, on a Friday afternoon, as the ambassador has said, we're very pleased to be here with you for a quick and hopefully very lively and engaging discussion on digital diplomacy. My name is Petros Petrikos. I am a researcher at the University of Nicosia and a project manager for the Diplomatic Academy, which is the knowledge partner for this panel. Our panel is it consists of 4 people. With us, we also have online. I would like to start from Dr. Cornelio Biola, who is an associate professor of diplomatic studies at the University of Oxford and the head of the Oxford Digital Diplomacy Research Group. Then we have Dr. Federica Bicchi on my far right, who is an associate professor in the Department of International Relations at the London School of Economics and the director of the European Foreign Policy Unit of the LSE. And last but not least, we have Ambassador ad honorem Evriviadis, who has had a long career serving the Cyprus diplomatic service for 43 years in different posts, starting his career at the UN in 1976, winning throughout this period several awards and also publishing on different topics with regards to diplomacy. So we have a very hybrid panel, both consisting of experts but also academics. And I do hope that we manage to touch upon this topic of which is the digital diplomacy. It has actually been described as a beast. I believe it was during our discussion with Federica, who is it an entity that is to be tamed, or should it roam free? And starting off with that question, what are the main developments revolving around this beast known as digital diplomacy? And Dr. Bick, if you don't mind, I would like to start off with you to provide some background and context as to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for showing up on a Friday afternoon, last panel. I think that it's great to have you here. Thank you to people watching us online. I'll just say a couple of words to frame this topic, because we have heard for the whole of today the importance of technology. We heard the German ambassador talking about the fact that they are looking for IT skilled people to go to Germany. We have heard during the UN General Assembly how AI can help with the Sustainable Development Goals. AI seems to be everywhere. And it is coming also to diplomacy, which is a bit of a secretive word and seems slightly different, slightly separated from what everyone else is doing. But in a way, I think that diplomacy is being transformed by technology and digital technology in particular. To start with, I just would like to remind ourselves of the definition of diplomacy. There are plenty of definitions out there, but one that works well is the management of international relations by negotiation and mediation. This is interesting because it puts mediation at the heart of diplomacy. There are a number of estranged entities that maybe previously were a single country. Think of West Germany and East Germany. And diplomacy is the go-between, is the mediating effort between these estranged entities. What does digital diplomacy then add to this mix? Digital technologies further mediate the contact. We kind of assume that diplomacy is about person to person, and instead most of what is happening at the moment, in fact, is mediated by digital technology. So in a way, we're entering in a bit of a new universe. You might say technology was always there. The telegraph, the phone, the invention of paper. But now it is a particular moment and one that prompts us to consider whether we are entering a sort of a post-human diplomacy world where the relevance of technology is such that it's transforming the way diplomacy is conducted, performed, and what it actually means. I'll mention just three aspects of this. The first one is as a tool. When we talk about diplomacy as a tool, and I know that my colleagues will talk more about this, but we have to imagine by now a sort of a seamless blending of human and technological interventions. So a diplomatic initiative might start with a WhatsApp message, might continue with an in-person coffee. But before that in-person coffee, maybe there is a last-minute Google search about the person that the diplomat is going to meet, certainly a few emails to follow, a report that maybe is first shared through electronic means protected by a degree of confidentiality, and maybe it ends up in a WhatsApp message again, like for instance the one between the Greek Minister of Migration and the Turkish Minister of Migration recently to seal a deal about the land border. So somehow we are in this blended universe of human and technology working together. Also, this post-human diplomacy is characterized as a topic. Loads of diplomatic negotiations at the moment are focusing on technology. As in the form of advisory boards, in the form of national initiatives, like in the case of China, or in the form of EU acts. We've seen at the moment there are loads of EU acts being discussed, the AI Act being the last one. Last but not least, the digitalization of diplomacy is happening in a context that is heavily polarized in terms of geopolitics as well. And therefore, there is an emphasis on competition and what this can bring. And here, it's interesting because, in fact, the material aspect, the geo aspect of geopolitics, it brings us back to the material basis of this, where the cables go underwater, the chips that are used, and so on and so forth. And so I think that we are at a very interesting moment to stop and talk about digital diplomacy, because there are really a lot of aspects that have an influence on transparency. But I'll do that here.
Thank you very much, Federica, for your input. And indeed, you've touched upon the different definitions, as we've said, and you've referred to the tools as well. You've begun mentioning the tools, and for that, I would actually like to yield the floor to Dr. Biola. You are with us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you well. I can hear you very well.
Fantastic. I'd like to ask you to share a bit more about the tools and the different methods that we see different diplomats or other political actors use when engaging with these pieces, digital diplomacy.
First of all, thank you very much to the organizers of the Cyprus Forum, but also the Diplomatic Academy for inviting me. And let me also take the opportunity to say hello to Professor Bicky. We had a similar panel in February talking on the same issue, but also the Ambassador Yiaga, with whom we had an excellent first meeting in London years ago, discussing, interestingly, similar topics. Many days and months have passed since then, and the digital diplomacy continues to evolve. And I think that the question of instruments and methods, I think it's evolving. So how to approach this issue? So let me build on what Professor Bicky said before. And I like this idea of digital diplomacy changing something from probably more importantly about the way in which diplomacy operates. This question has been from the beginning. I think we asked that question in the event organized by Ambassador Yiaga in London in 2015, 2016. Are digital technologies changing fundamentally diplomacy? Are they affecting its DNA? Or is something that is being played out at the margins in terms of certain type of new instruments that are being added, whether it's a WhatsApp like the telegraph used to be before or something else? And I think at the beginning, in 2016, the feeling was that it's not much. I think I started to change my views of that more recently, and the reason is that we have new technologies. And let me start developing this point. When you think about digital diplomacy, you usually apply two different frames. One is we look at how these new technologies emerge. It is kind of stage approach, stage model, in which new technologies emerge. And then MFAs and diplomats look around and try to identify opportunities to improve their work, to make it more effective. And we saw that with social media. Social media was the first stage, 2010, 2012. The idea was that these instruments can help what? Can help with public diplomacy. That was a big thing at that time. And it worked until we got to the dark side. And the dark side disinformation started to create problems. And then we have the new adaptation with strategic communication units inside the MFAs trying to deal with disinformation. And then we had a new instrument during the pandemic, exactly what we're using right now, Zoom, right? And the teleconference. Interestingly, these instruments continue after the pandemic to be used because they provide a good opportunity for people to coordinate their positions, start NATO summits and so on. And what is happening right now, I think, what I feel this model is not proper one, is that it sort of looks at on the issue of opportunity, and that puts a lot of emphasis on social media. But I think there is a different model, and we have to pay attention to this. The different model that I think we start to sense is the technological acceleration model. What it means that these technologies that we see changes more fundamentally the context in which diplomacy operates. Changes what? Changes by the fact that it accelerates the time in which we have to react. The defining feature of this kind of transformation is speed, not opportunity, speed. You have to react faster on social media to control the narrative. You have to react faster, with Zoom because you need to coordinate positions in times of crisis. And they think what we see nowadays with AI, and they think this is probably the next big thing, is that we need this kind of instruments to improve our decisions. And this opens up a whole new game, in my view. I'm writing a paper on this at the moment, in which I discuss exactly this. Where do we see, where are we going with this? I think, because we also, this is a Cyprus event, I think there are three different scenarios in which you can see this playing out. The first scenario that we see with some of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, using this kind of technology, especially AI, is, let's say, the Daedalus Icarus myth, Greek myth, in which you try, many fear the Icarus moment, you fly too close to the sun, you get burned. So you play safe, you play like the Daedalus, you reach Sicily, because you don't take risk. And we see this kind of application of AI, for instance, in consular affairs. This is another way in which processing visas or chatbots to interact. This is playing safe. This is the Daedalus scenario. A second one in which you start to take more risk, but you have to be careful, is the Arachne, the goddess, the weaver that challenged Athena. And then you get punished. You take risk, but you are not prepared. You are not prepared to do certain things that you can burn. And that I think, there is, for some Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they think, they can do a lot of new tools in terms of using, press releases or playing, a little bit more. But they feel that the risk of getting it bad, especially in the conditions that AI is not necessarily very well developed at the moment, would be bad. And the last one, which I really like, and that takes me to the point of post-human diplomacy, Professor Vicky, is the Heracles model, in which you take risk, you win, and you join the gods. Heracles was invited later to join the gods because he overcame the 12 labors. And then you see this kind of effort being put in which AI actually, because of the speed, you have to be more careful about how to do negotiations, how to prepare for negotiations, and to adapt to this. So what I'm saying here is that the new tools that we see now being developed in digital diplomacy are not necessarily about opportunity as such, as they used to be with social media, but more about the fact that time and speed is becoming an imperative, and you have to adapt to the speed necessarily, not to the opportunities that arise. I'm going to stop here with my commentary for the moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biola. You've touched upon a lot of interesting questions there, but before we go on, I would also like to ask the ambassador to share some insights as regarding to this question. How how have you interacted in this context when it comes to digital diplomacy throughout your career?
First, just call me by my first name. My name is Euripides, and I'd like to be called by that. I echo the sentiments of the previous distinguished speakers in thanking you and the Cyprus Forum and each and every one of you for being here to attend this on a Friday afternoon. And of course, special thanks to Cornelio. We go way back with Professor Biola, so it's a great pleasure even to see you through cyberspace, which is another testament of how technology is involving diplomacy, as we call hybrid diplomacy. I think it was Darwin that said that the species that will survive are not necessarily the strongest ones, but the ones that are able to adapt to change. And I think we, diplomats, as diplomatic species, will not survive if we do not adopt and adapt this technology, knowing and be cognizant of its good, being cognizant of its bad, being cognizant of its ugly, hashtag dark side, as we used to say in so many things. The trick is, I mean, you know, I'm not a professor, I'm not a man of academia, I've been a practitioner, as Petros has said, for 43 years. And when you represent Cyprus, it's, you have another definition of diplomacy and another definition of a diplomat, because everything, yes, diplomacy is management, international relations, through mediation. At the same time, you do represent and protect and promote the interests of your country. And the key thing is to be able to converge those interests with others in order to have an agreement. So the most challenging part for me, if I can share that, is really making sure that the use of technology, that the output was commensurate to the time input, because there are only 25 hours in the day, yeah? There is only, so you have to target, you have to prioritize, and doing, you know, I was very, very active on Twitter. I mean, for a long time I had more followers than my own ministry. But what's the moral of that? Every other day I used to be reprimanded by my permanent secretary. This is not serious. I said, it wasn't meant to be serious. This is serious. That is not serious. You have to cast a wide net. So when somebody looked at my EEG Twitter account, they could never make out whether I was an ambassador, whether I was a tour operator, whether I was an energy expert, which I'm not. Charles here is. Whether I was an archaeologist. And the answer is, it's all of the above, because you are a practitioner. And my professor used to say that in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. Because you have so many factors and variables that you have to take into consideration, and you have to survive in the system. And if you really go against the system, you know what? It's not career enhancing. So the trick is to be able to take this technology, the digital aspect of it, and translate it into offline effectiveness. If you're not effective in that, I think it's just about a waste of time. The biggest challenge that I think we'll address, and please feel free to interrupt me because I'm a little bit of a blabbermouth, and you have to stop me. The trick is to be able, your online presence, to make it offline effectiveness. And the biggest challenge that we're going to be facing, all of us are going to be facing, is AI. Now that is a beast, a real beast that needs to be understood, to be grasped, to be tamed, to be contained. And it's a huge thing how AI will be affecting diplomacy. It's already affecting diplomacy, and not just the light aspect of ask GDP about something and you get an answer. That's kindergarten stuff. We have to think hard of how it does, deep fakes, how it will affect democracy, human rights, the rule of law, how it affects diplomacy itself. and also try to look ahead of the curve. I'm sorry if I exceeded my time. I want to stop because we have to give time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Actually, you have touched upon a very good thematic here, because as we've seen throughout our speakers' insights, it's a multifaceted issue. There are plenty of tools at our disposal. It has both of a light but also of a dark side, if you like, and this can be overwhelming because of the disposal of all this information that we have. It sometimes creates this sense of a fog of war, if you like. It blurs, in a way, reality. And I'd like to, in line with our theme, which is transparency, I'd like to explore a bit how we can avoid this blur through digital diplomacy. And first I will go back to Federica to see what kind of, how do we approach this in terms of this blending of digital and non-digital spaces, as also everybody's mentioned with the offline spaces, and how do we use this to enhance and protect our democracy and then enhance resilience?
Thank you. I'll just, because to keep it interesting for the Friday afternoon feeling, I'll have to disagree with my colleagues. Because in a way, I think it's not just time, and it's not just offline spaces that are being affected. It's online spaces that are becoming absolutely central to politics and international politics in particular. And so I think that time absolutely is speeding up, but the life online, what has been called on life, is taking a relevance, a political significance of its own. So unless it is online, it's not real, is the current paradox. So the challenge here is how to make these online spaces democratic and transparent. And here we need all to chip in and try to follow closely what is happening, because at times it is intentionally obscure if people don't understand what's going on. Yes, it is complex, but at times it's also very beneficial to some big tech companies who are keeping the power very tightly in their own hands. And here, you know, we need a sort of a democracy from below to maintain the discussion going, maintain the attention going, not necessarily by rejecting technology, rather on the contrary, by engaging with technology in order to make sure that it's in accordance with our democratic values. But that's why I would put the emphasis on online spaces as central for our discussion.
Thank you, Federica. Given we are putting this emphasis on online spaces, another thing that maybe Cornelio as well would like to answer is this issue that we see in terms of disinformation and propaganda taking place online. And this is also used as a tool in digital diplomacy spaces. If you would like to comment on that.
Absolutely, and I like to support the point raised by Professor Bicchi about online spaces. We are talking nowadays about this new concept that didn't exist like 10 years ago, like digital sovereignty, technological sovereignty, and all these kind of things. Because there is a feeling that this kind of online spaces need to be regulated, especially in Europe, right? That an information environment has to function properly and purge of the toxicity. It's also a concept that continues to evolve. But I'm trying to link this, so I still think there is a question of time and speed here. The reason for that is related to the concept that you raised at the beginning, Petros, the fog of war. What's the fog of war? Fog of war is a concept that usually associated with Clausewitz. Because it speaks about in this kind of environment, there is a lot of uncertainty about what is happening. And you have to ask yourself, why diplomats feel this concept nowadays in the context not of war, even in peace, right? And I think there is a reason. What do diplomats, and I think the ambassador knows this practically very well. This is why he was probably reprimanded unjustly by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Because what diplomats try to do is to send signals. Signals about what? The position of my country, the values I represent, right? Ambassador has done an excellent job in London to project certain values about Cyprus. That this is Cyprus, a country that, has a certain type of feeling, a certain type of ethos. And this is what he was trying to do, not a very rigid, very hierarchical, the signals that he was trying to send. And I think sending signals is part of the core mission of a diplomat. We've done this before, the digital age, by stating a position, by making official statements. Well, with the digital nowadays, you use social media, right, to send signals. But there is a problem. You are not alone. And that connects with the topic mentioned by Professor Bicky, because in these new spaces, there are many others. There are other ambassadors sending signals, your peers. There is also the public participating in the conversation. Honest public, I'm not saying necessarily that it's a hostile public, but it's putting pressure on you to react to certain events. And there is, of course, the hostile party, hence, the discussion about weaponization of information, disinformation coming from Russia and other countries. And that creates uncertainty. And the uncertainty, I think, for ambassadors and others is particularly important because it says something. I'm sending a signal, and I see the reaction. How strong is the reaction? Can I make sense of that? Or is this reaction organic? Or is it manufactured through disinformation and trolls and all kinds of bots and these kind of things? So, in a sense, when you talk about reactions to your position, to your signals, is the support increasing or decreasing? And that ties back to the point I said before about time and speed. You have to do that. You don't have a week to think about it. You don't have a month to think about this. Like, for instance, in the past, you have the ambassadors of Britain in Constantinople 3 months to reflect on certain issue because this is how long it took, for the carriage to bring the mail. Now, certain things move very fast. And this is where I think, it put a lot of pressure on people how to react exactly in these spaces. In these spaces, there is a lot of uncertainty, and the more we see this kind of information inhabiting these spaces, the more uncertainty creates. Where are we going with this? This is an important question. Ambassador Yiaga mentioned this. Is it AI? I think probably at the moment, AI is seen as one possible instrument to deal with uncertainty, and I worked a little bit on that. But think about the logical conclusion. If AI is the one that can help with the uncertainty, that creates an escalation. So are we getting to this point that Professor Bicky mentioned at the beginning, that the post-humanist diplomacy in which we're going to have AI, backlink, AI, online in these kinds of spaces? It seems like, from what we see, and that's probably the scary thing, and from a professional ambassador of Yiaga, it will be interesting to see how to react. Is he the last ambassador?
Thank you, Dr. Viola. Ambassador, you have the floor. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much, Cornelia, always getting our mental wheels turning. And thank you for disagreeing as well, Federica.
Just for the fun of it.
Just for the fun of it, but, I'm not oblivious to reality. I know that what is defined as real has real consequences. Therefore, online spaces, as you say, central, okay, but I say yes and no. Like a true diplomat, trying to go on both sides. I say yes and no. Why? Because the more things change, in a way, the more things will have to remain the same. Keep your eye on the ball. If you lose the post-humanist diplomacy, Professor Viola, my dear Cornelius, if we lose that, I think we're totally lost. The human element must always be there. I want to be able, I've made a lifetime out of reading people's faces and knowing what they were thinking by the way they were holding their eyes. I want to be able to look at people's faces. I want to be able to negotiate. I want to be able to shake a hand. And I'm not going to rely solely what AI is telling me or any other digital gadget. Because first of all, AIs are not, for the moment, that accurate. They hallucinate, so they give you false information. But I'm saying that if we divorce diplomacy from its human element, from the basics, which is representation, negotiation, people to people, it's hybrid diplomacy. Let's call it hybrid diplomacy. I think it's an invention of Oxford University and of Professor Viola. It's hybrid. Yes, right now we're doing diplomacy through Zoom, okay, but at the same time, keep our eyes on the ball. It is time and speed. Is that good or bad? I mean, President Jefferson said that we have not heard from our ambassador in Spain in the last 2 years. If we do not hear from him again this year, perhaps we should write him a letter. Now, we have come a long way, but also too much speed and time and immediate decisions. I think sometimes we can see the tree and lose the forest. You need time to reflect. We are being pushed and we're being driven. And we should govern technology, and technology shouldn't govern us. I mean, I know for a long while, when I was doing social media, I was suffering from FOMO, fear of missing out. FOMO, okay, keep looking. What did so-and-so say? I need to react to that. Hey, hold your horses. Sit back, think, reflect. This is what diplomacy is all about. And it's going to be more and more challenging because with deep fakes, what you'll be saying about the dark side and information, disinformation, the fact that AI can really mimic you and it's you when in fact it's not you. And I'm going to take a decision based on that? No. I'm going to seek him out and really try to see what is happening, because again, what comes to my mind for some reason, I don't know how mine works, is Marlowe's Faust, when there is a section that says you might think that you're dancing with the devil, but it is the devil dancing with you. Humans must remain in control. We have a situation with AI where they are developing in terms of AI time. Years are in terms of weeks, months. We are developing a situation where AI will be thinking and will be creating information and it will be making suggestions on foreign policy, and AIs are going to be talking among themselves. I find that dangerous and frankly frightening. We have to learn to ride the wave. We have to adapt and adopt by being very, very cognizant of what the dark side is, and of course try to contain it. Mustafa Suleiman is talking about containment. Maybe he's the canon of the Cold War of how to contain these things, Cornelia. Thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions. If there are any, we will take the first one here at the front and then one at the back. And
people can introduce themselves.
Yes, and if you can also introduce yourselves, and then we'll take a third one. Do we have time for a third question as well? Yes, okay.
And thank you very much for a fascinating conversation. In fact, this is, for me personally, this is one of the most interesting discussions, because my name is Andre Goodfriend, and I had been the director of the Office of E-Diplomacy at the U.S. State Department for a couple of years, from 2017 to 2019, a Foreign Service officer, diplomat after 30 years. So I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Ambassador, about the need to keep humans centered at the center of the process. I don't think we're in a post-human era of diplomacy. The Office of E-Diplomacy that I headed for a while, in fact, was created to insert diplomats into the process and not have diplomacy be technology-driven, which was a risk 20 years ago, as the technologists thought, we're going to use technology to change the way diplomacy is carried out. The pushback, the reaction was to ensure that diplomats are engaged in shaping how we use diplomacy, and that's why that office was created. So that as we've moved forward, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on this. As we've moved forward, we no longer, in fact, need to have special offices that insert technology into what we're doing, because most of our diplomatic colleagues now, 20 years later, have become comfortable with using the technologies, so that it's no longer technology-driven or data-driven. In fact, the conversation now is, should we say it's data-driven diplomacy? And I think even that's being pushed aside by data-informed diplomacy. That the diplomats themselves have enough of an understanding of the technology to engage via Twitter or to engage via other social media or to draw on data and use tools, whether it's AI or other analytical tools, to help them make the decisions. And this is where I'd like to just touch on that aspect of speed being a new factor in what technology has created. That it's perhaps 10 years ago, with television always on everywhere, there was a need to react without information at our fingertips. But now, through the technologies that we have, we spend a lot less time looking for the information we need, so that even with less time to react, we have more time to make a decision, to actually reflect. So in some respects, I'm very much agreeing with the ambassador, but I have some difficulties with the perspectives of those who are putting technology too much at the forefront and not recognizing that, in fact, humans at this point are drawing on that technology to facilitate diplomacy.
Thank you. Let's quickly here take all the questions. There was another one at the back, and then another one at the front, and then we can answer them all together. Thank you.
Many thank you. I would like to first say thank you for your valuable insights and enjoyable conversation. I would like to touch upon the issue of containment, as Mr. Everybody's mentioned earlier. We are now seeing many authorities around the world scrambling to actually contain this new technology and impose rules on it. So first I would like your opinion on, do you think this is a step in the right direction, as in ex-post rules that aim to mitigate the harm after it's done? Or would a preferable approach be to find a way to solve the problems before they even occur? And that is actually an interesting subject, because tomorrow we are hosting a panel on how technology can be used in politics at the Classic Hotel midday. So it seems an interesting conjunction of the two, as in how can technology actually help to facilitate more transparent and more democratic procedures? So, yeah.
Thank you. And the third question.
I can say that like that loudly. From what I understand, because I come from the industry, so it's very useful and interesting what I heard here. My question is, from what I understand, is... okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I understand that probably, and it is a question, it is better to have a human diplomacy rather than a robot diplomacy, or human ambassadors rather than robot ambassadors, because the human interventions offers the uncertainty. I was thinking about that because of what you expressed before. What do you think about that? What is the answer?
Thank you. So we will begin answering the first question on the post-human aspect of diplomacy, the data-driven versus the informed diplomacy, and how. Let's start with Dr. Biola, if you'll have the floor.
No, thank you very much. Maybe for all these questions, I think that they go with the core of the dilemma that we are facing at the moment. And I think I'm not trying to suggest here that the robots should replace diplomats. Of course, I'm just trying that there are constraints on on what diplomats can do. And these constraints come from the fact that there is a lot of information, there is less and less time to deal with this kind of information. There was some interesting statistic I saw last week, but this statistic changed, so you have to take them with a grain of salt. That generative AI, which is not intelligent AI, generative AI predicts, the most likely number or word, from a big data set. So generative AI is likely to reach the medium level of performance of a human by the end of this decade and to surpass 95% of humans by 2040. So what does it mean? It's going to do much better than humans. So from this point of view, you may see a push for Ministry of Foreign Affairs in certain areas to deal with that. So post-human is not about robot replacing, but about how the tool is going to integrate and how to at what level you see this kind of tools applied. The direction, I think that connected to the third question, the direction that we see nowadays in terms of how to deal with this problem is by creating levels of risk. The European AI Act, which passed a number of readings and is supposed to be adopted by the end of this year, talks about 4 levels of risks. So that's a model. High-level risk, in which they say, well, we shouldn't allow AI to interfere. Medium level of risk, low level of risk. So I think, for an MFA, this is probably is going to be a model to adopt. In the sense, in much areas, you're going to see, because they are doing better, certain things, to be done. Shall we? And this is not science fiction. This is not science fiction. The Chinese, they are very opaque of what they are doing, but they've been pushing a lot of effort, for instance, to develop this kind of AI-informed, if you like it. It's not AI-driven. AI-informed, for instance, models to understand where it's better to invest in the Belt and Road, given all kinds of conditions. Can a diplomat do this? Of course it can do it. It can have a bigger team and experts and can draw different expertise. No question it can do it. Can it do it faster and more accurate? I'm not sure about that. Maybe now, but maybe in a couple of years, maybe not. And if you are faster, this is what I'm saying, you have a competitive advantage. And that, I think, is the drive that you have to see for MFAs. It's not, I'm not advocating that, Ambassador Yiaga should be the last human ambassador, but I'm saying that there are severe constraints in terms of how to handle the volume of information and the speed for decisions in conditions in which you are in competition with others. And probably I'm going to leave it here at this point, but that's, I think, where I see this going with the new technologies.
Thank you, Dr. Biola. Dr. Bicchi, if you have your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to suggest that post-human diplomacy points towards robot diplomacy and that's it. But at the same time, I find it fascinating, for instance, to see the transformation in consular affairs, where the human element is reduced more and more. And in the case of the Canadian, unfortunately, even more. The Brits are going down exactly the same route, not for the final decision in certain cases, but by constructing a set of layers of technological decisions that pre-order the field. So to get to that human element, there is a bit of a technological barrier in between. Does it help? Does it not help? But this is what we need to discuss. This is where the politics comes in. I mean, is it good to find a chatbot when you're asking for help? Maybe it's good if your fridge is not working. It's less good if you're stuck in the middle of the COVID pandemic. These are the type of topics that we need to talk about in order to be all comfortable with the outcome. Keeping in mind that the technology creates big digital divides. So that not only 1/3 of humans are, off the internet, etc., but the level of engagement with the technology, the sophistication of the technology available to diplomats of 193 countries, it's very different. And therefore, one direction might be open for some, but not for others. And so we need to keep an eye also on that aspect of humanity. That there are some diplomatic services that encounter a different level of technological challenges. At the same time, to finish on an optimist side, I mean, for small countries, it can be an unexpected bonus that helps them to project well beyond what they would otherwise be able to. So, I mean, we need to keep everything discussing all these points.
And if I might quickly add, the whole discussion on small countries, small states is a whole other topic, but very interesting to also see how it can be integrated in this.
If I can take a hook from that, technology can help small and medium-sized countries, properly leveraged, can help small and medium-sized countries punch above their weight. I'm 100% convinced about that, and that was my empirical experience in using. You mentioned consular affairs, correct? Immediate human crisis, floods, terrorist attacks, immediately you're able to do it in zero time. There you need speed, and you need it immediately because people's lives are at stake. And you have to come through, and the taxpayer will judge you how efficient you are or not by the way you respond. So, yes, technology can, and it should. And like I said at the beginning, we have to adapt and adopt. At the same time, we have to be very, very cognizant. I have colleagues that came to me, well, I read it, ChatGPT. Professor Google told me. I said, who is Professor Google? I never heard of him. Go back to the drawing board. Like we used to write a paper at the university, and you had to cross your references, not just parroting. Think critically, but use it effectively. Containment, I want to do on that. How do you contain something that it is really emerging? I think it's, and I think it was the UK Deputy Prime Minister that addressed the General Assembly the other day, that he said, rightly so, and I agree, we cannot afford to become trapped in debates about whether AI is a tool for good or a tool for ill. It will be a tool of both. And knowing what it is, grasp it, legislate on it, contain it in the sense that you have, at the national level and at the regional level, and if you want at the international level. I mean, internationally, you have there, for instance, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is an agency fully devoted to atomic and to nuclear power. Okay? Nuclear weapons do not become smarter. AI becomes smarter. Nuclear weapons do not take decisions by themselves. It is the human, Truman, that decided to use nuclear weapons. It was a human that decided. It wasn't artificial intelligence. It was somebody that made this. So, and it can be contained through, yes, it's difficult, but it will also take a different mindset. I mean, Professor Biola spoke about sovereignty, meta-sovereignty, internet sovereignty. states will have to have a different concept of sovereignty as well and allow the Googles and the Microsofts to be at the table. So they too, because they are the generators of this, they too are there to tell us what they're doing. For instance, one thing that you can do to contain is really outlaw bots that pretend to be humans. To be outlawed. I think that's one thing that we can think about. We can think many, many more in order to have this. We don't want, how shall I say, a digital or an AI curtain descending upon the continent, descending among the global north and the global south, because everybody has to have a pie, has to have a piece of the pie in this. Just as social media, you know, when it first came out, now everybody is engaging in social media. The global south as well. The same thing with artificial intelligence. It should not just be, of course, with the Americans and the Chinese. And we haven't even touched the issue of dual usage and the military aspect of artificial intelligence. The same artificial intelligence that will drive an autonomous vehicle is the same artificial intelligence that can drive a tank. And it will decide where to shoot. I want to, of course, finish on a positive note and to say, make love, not war. That was, you know, that was the theme of my generation. You know, now they make love and war at the same time, so but it's terrible. But anyhow.
Thank you very
Cornelia,
much.
it was such a great pleasure to see you, even through via Virespace. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have overrun. I'd like to thank our speakers for sharing their insights and actually engaging in such a nice discussion. It's a multifaceted issue. It has so many different angles to it. But I hope that this will be the start of a very interesting conversation. It is already happening, actually. So, and thank you as well, our audience who are here and also watching us from home, who have stayed with us until the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good that we disagree, that we agreed to disagree without being disagreeable.
It was a fascinating conversation. I hope I didn't come across.
No, come on. Everything.
But I'd like to continue the conversation.
Maximo.
Thank you.
Charles,